What if the Knights Templar were never the beginning, but the faint echo of something far older, an inheritance buried beneath the dust of forgotten empires long before the Red Cross was stitched onto white mantles, before swords were raised in the name of faith? The world itself was a cathedral. The sky was its dome, the rivers its corridors of light, and the stones of the earth spoke a language only the ancients could understand. Along the Nile, priests of Egypt traced geometry not as art, but as prayer. In the glimmering dawn over Sumer, the first astronomers marked the heavens with reed and clay, believing each constellation to be the syllable of a divine sentence. And on islands now whispered about as myth, perhaps Atlantis, perhaps something else, builders shaped temples whose measurements mirrored the pulse of the stars. They believed number was the breath of God, that harmony was the truest form of worship, and that every proportion carried within it the music of creation itself. When these civilizations crumbled, their libraries burned, their tongues forgotten. The knowledge did not vanish, it went underground, hidden within mystery schools, preserved by wanderers, carried in symbols that would later reappear in the least expected of places, carved into the walls of Gothic cathedrals, woven into the very blueprint of the Templar commanderies. So when the Knights Templar rose from the smoke of the Crusades, perhaps they were not a new order at all. Perhaps they were the memory of an older one reborn. Their fortresses aligned with the stars as the pyramids once did. Their sigils carried echoes of the same sacred ratios known to Babylonian sages. Their silence was not ignorance, but discipline, the vow of those who had seen truth and learned how fragile it was in the hands of kings. History remembers them as warriors, bankers, heretics. Yet behind every accusation and legend lies the trace of an idea that the world was once governed by a hidden geometry, a balance between spirit and matter, heaven and earth. The Templars may have believed they were its last custodians. Every coin they minted, every chapel they raised, every secret they died to protect, each was a note in a song that had been playing since the dawn of civilization. And if you listen closely, through the static of centuries, you can still hear it, the rhythm of stone and starlight, the heartbeat of a wisdom too ancient for our calendars to measure. Before the cross, before the sword, before the order itself, there was light, order, and a knowledge that shaped the foundations of the world. So as we begin this journey, ask yourself not what the Templars discovered in the Holy Land, but what they remembered there. Because sometimes the most sacred revelations are not found, they are recalled. If you wish to follow this trail of forgotten light, where ancient science meets the secret legacy of the Templars, stay with us. What comes next may change the way you see history itself. They say that when God spoke the universe into being, his first language was mathematics. But the ancients understood something deeper, that mathematics itself was not the invention of man, it was the architecture of reality, the hidden scaffolding beneath creation. When we look at the stars, we see randomness, but to them, the sages of Egypt, of Babylon, of the lands now lost to flood and time, every orbit, every ratio, every curve of the moon was sacred. The same proportions that governed the heavens governed the human body, the flowering of a plant, the rise of a temple's arch. To know these patterns was to read the mind of the divine. The Egyptians called it the geometry of heaven. They believed that the temple was not built to honor the gods, but to contain them, to bring the order of the cosmos down to earth through perfect form and alignment. Each chamber, each column, each shaft of light entering at solstice was a key in a vast celestial equation. The priests did not merely perform rituals, they reenacted the mathematics of creation itself. Far across the desert in Mesopotamia, the same idea took root in clay tablets and the turning of ziggurats. The Babylonians watched the paths of planets not for prophecy alone, but because they believed those paths mirrored the movement of the soul after death. To walk the spiral staircases of their temples was to ascend symbolically through the geometry of the heavens, returning to the source from which all things came. When the Templars built their cathedrals, they echoed this forgotten symmetry. Look closely at the great rose windows of Chartres, of Amiens, of Notre-Dame is not merely decoration, but an echo of stellar patterns mapped millennia before Christ. The proportions of the nave, the ratio of the transept, the alignment of light through stained glass all replicate the same sacred math once carved in granite at Giza and inscribed in golden ratio on papyrus. How could medieval knights warriors, not scholars, have known this? Perhaps they didn't discover it at all. Perhaps it was given to them, passed through hidden circles guarded by those who remembered the ancient science that the world had chosen to forget. Their architects were called magistri operis, masters of the work, but their true work was not masonry. It was memory. Each cathedral became a code, a stone library that preserved what words could no longer say. Its walls sang of light and measure, of the divine blueprint that runs through all living things. And when pilgrims stepped inside, they unknowingly walked into a map of the cosmozone that taught silently that heaven was not above but within. The Templars understood this geometry not as decoration but as revelation. The cross itself, when reduced to its proportions, mirrors the same harmonic intervals that define the structure of matter. The circle and the square, the eternal marriage of heaven and earth, appeared in their seals, their tombs, and even their roots across Europe, traced deliberately along lines of energy known to the ancients. There are whispers that deep beneath their commanderies, beneath the stone vaults and candlelight, lay diagrams too advanced for their time grids that map the Earth's resonance. Records of planetary alignments that would not be proven for centuries. To the uninitiated, superstition. To those who listened, the purest echo of the geometry of heaven. And perhaps that is what their secret truly was. Not gold, not relics, not power, but pattern, the awareness that creation is built on harmony. That to know proportion is to know God. We often think the Templars sought the Holy Grail as an object, but maybe it was never a cup. Maybe it was the formula for balance itself, the bridge between matter and spirit, hidden in plain sight, disguised as architecture, worship, and art. If you stand at sunrise before the doors of an old Templar chapel and let the first light fall through its oculus, you might feel it still, that gentle hum between light and stone, number and soul. The geometry is still there, waiting for the world to remember. long before the chisel touched the first stone of Giza. Before Greece dreamed of its gods or Rome drew its maps, the land between the rivers whispered a secret that would outlive empires. They called it Akur, the house of the mountain. But to those who listened deeper, it was not a place, it was a veil. Babylon was never just a city. It was a mirror of the heavens. Its towers and ziggurats were built as replicas of constellations, their angles drawn to the paths of the wandering stars. The priests of Marduk believed that by mimicking the sky upon the earth, they could summon the same order into their lives, binding chaos under divine geometry. Theirs was not worship, it was imitation. The Babylonians saw the universe as a layered fabric plane of existence separated by vibration, not distance. Between those planes hung what they called the Veil of Anu, a thin border between the world of form and the world of essence. To cross it was to witness truth unfiltered by human perception. But such knowledge came with a cost one could not return unchanged. Through the smoke of oil lamps and the rhythmic chants of priests, the first diagrams were drawn, circles within circles, interlocking like the gears of unseen machinery. They recorded the pulse of time, the repetition of the stars, and the breathing rhythm of the earth itself. These patterns would later resurface as the Kabbalah's tree of life, as the mandalas of the East, as the blueprints for every sacred temple that sought to bridge heaven and earth. But in Babylon, geometry was not just spiritual, it was political. Kings sought to control the veil, believing they could command the heavens by mastering its pattern. They built towers to reach the gods, machines of stone meant to pierce the firmament. One such structure, the Etemenanki, rose 7 terraces high, each layer a step closer to the stars. They said its builders spoke a single language once shared with the divine until the pattern fractured. The confusion of tongues that followed was not a punishment but a defense. Heaven had closed itself to man, and yet fragments of the pattern survived. In the clay tablets buried beneath the Tigris, symbols appear that no scholar has fully translated, spirals of impossible precision. Golden ratios encoded long before mathematics was born. Some depict a gate surrounded by concentric waves pulsing outward as if marking the spot where the veil thinned. Centuries later, travelers from the Westmen in white cloaks marked by red crosses would arrive in those same lands. They came under the banner of faith, yet dug where no scripture mentioned, following maps that led not to holy relics but to resonance points. Beneath the sands near Ur and Babylon, they uncovered chambers lined with basalt and copper, built to amplify something that could not be seen. The chronicles say they carried away relics, but perhaps what they found was not an object but a frequency. The Templars never forgot the veil. In their writings, it became the Veil of Babel, a symbol for the boundary between light and shadow, matter and meaning. Their cathedrals were attempts to reweave it, to draw the divine vibration back through stone and sound. The Gregorian chants that echoed in their halls were not just prayers. They were harmonic codes calculated to resonate with the very geometry of heaven. And in the center of every Templar seal, the cross stood within a circle, the same shape carved into Babylonian tablets. It was the oldest symbol of all, the union of heaven and earth, energy and form, the eternal cycle of descent and return. Somewhere beneath the ruins of modern-day Iraq, Beneath the dust and ruin, the foundations of that ancient ziggurat still hum faintly when the stars align. Satellite scans have shown magnetic anomalies perfectly circular, as if the Earth remembers what man has forgotten. The geometry endures, the veil still breathes. They say if you stand in those ruins at night, where the Euphrates meets the dry wind, and close your eyes, you can hear it, a low, pulsing rhythm, like the heartbeat of the world. That is the sound of the Babylonian veil, forever between revelation and ruin. When the veil of Babylon began to close, not all who had glimpsed beyond it chose to turn away. Some stayed in the half-light between worlds, learning to see in the dark. They were the ones later whispered about as the architects of shadow keepers of forbidden symmetry, guardians of a wisdom too volatile for kings and too pure for priests. They did not build monuments for the living. Their temples were carved underground, in caverns where sunlight could never reach, their walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift with every flicker of torchlight. These were not decorations. They were equations, instructions for reconstructing the cosmos from within. To them, the world was not solid but pliable, a pattern that could be rewritten if one understood its grammar. In the deepest chambers, they drew what they called the map of the returning light, a vast circle divided by 12 lines, each marking a gateway between planes. The circle's center was left empty, for it represented what they called the unseen axis, the point around which all things turned, but which itself could not be seen. To step into that center, they believed, was to vanish from the illusion of time. The architects were not a people, but a lineage of thought. Some came from the priesthoods of Sumer, others from Egypt's houses of life, and others still from nomads who carried star lore across the deserts. Wherever civilization collapsed, they moved like shadows, gathering fragments of the old design. They spoke no single tongue, but shared one symbol, a circle bisected by a vertical line, the mark of balance between what is known and what is hidden. It is said that when Babylon fell, they walked westward beneath new names. In the ruins of Nineveh, they buried copper discs engraved with patterns resembling modern circuit boards, as if anticipating a technology not yet born. In the tombs of Saqqara, they hid blueprints for temples whose acoustics matched the harmonic ratios of planetary orbits. In Delphi, they stood among the oracles, whispering to those who listened that the gods did not speak, they resonated. By the time the world entered the age of iron and empire, their teachings had become rumor, their diagrams mistaken for pagan art. But traces remained. The Pythagoreans studied fragments of their mathematics. The Hermetists decoded their cosmology. And much later, the Templars, guided by an invisible hand, would rediscover the same principles beneath the sands of the Holy Land. Some chroniclers say the architects foresaw the rise of organized faith and feared it. For they knew that once divine truth was named, it would be chained. So they hid their knowledge not in vaults, but in proportions in cathedrals, in music, in myth. Wherever beauty appeared with impossible precision, there they had been. It is in this shadow lineage that the Templar order found its reflection. Their cathedrals aligned to solstices as the architects once aligned their caverns. Their initiations echoed the descent and return that the architects encoded in geometry. The two orders were separated by thousands of years, yet their symbols spoke the same silent language. Perhaps that is why in every age those who seek truth beyond permission are called heretics. The architects of shadow were not servants of darkness, they were its interpreters. They understood that light to be seen must first meet resistance, that revelation only exists because of the veil that conceals it. And in this paradox, they built their greatest secret, a system not of domination, but of remembrance. They believed that every age would forget, and that in every age a few would awaken, drawn by echoes, guided by numbers, haunted by harmony. The Templars were one such echo, the Freemasons another. Each thought themselves the origin. None realized they were only continuations of the same pulse, the same architecture humming beneath history. If you stand in an empty cathedral at midnight and whisper the right tone, the walls seem to breathe back. That is their work, the shadow architects who taught stone how to remember. Their order has no name, only a pattern, and those who find it are forever changed, because once you see the design, you realize it's everywhere, in the veins of a leaf, in the orbit of moons, in the silence between your heartbeats. That silence was their true temple, and it still stands, invisible between every word we speak. When the world emerged from the long sleep of the Dark Ages, stone once again began to speak. Across Europe, cathedrals rose not merely as houses of worship, but as instruments, vast resonant chambers built according to the same silent design the architects of shadow had once guarded. The Templars, standing between the dust of Babylon and the dawn of Christendom, became the bridge between memory and manifestation. They called them temples, but they were maps of heaven translated into architecture. Each arch, each column, each beam of light passing through stained glass was part of a greater geometry, a living equation carved into stone. Those who entered felt it, even if they did not understand why. A pressure in the air, a hum behind the silence, as if the building itself were breathing. At Chartres, Reims, and Rosslyn, patterns emerge that cannot be coincidence. The proportions of the nave mirror the ratios of planetary orbits. The rose windows align with constellations visible only on certain nights. The labyrinths etched into the floors were not meant to confuse the feet, but to awaken the spirit, to make the pilgrim walk the path of the soul, winding ever inward toward the center, toward the same unseen axis the architects once described. To the uninitiated, these were churches. To those who knew, they were temples of echoes. For in every arch and vault, the Templars sought to resurrect what Babylon had lost, the vibration that bridged heaven and earth. The chants that filled their halls were tuned to frequencies calculated by the proportions of the building itself, creating standing waves of sound that resonated through the stone. In that resonance, they believed, the divine could be felt directly, not as doctrine, but as vibration. The builders were not random masons. They were chosen for their understanding of harmony, mathematics, and light. They knew how to shape silence. Every cornerstone was placed during specific astrological alignments. Every carving was a sigil, a wordless prayer encoded into form. Even the light filtering through colored glass carried instruction blue for the wisdom of heaven. red for the pulse of blood, gold for illumination. But perhaps the greatest secret was not what stood above ground, but what lay beneath. Beneath many of these cathedrals, the Templars constructed hidden chambers, echoing crypts whose measurements mirrored the structures above, forming a dual architecture, heaven above, earth below. It was said that in these lower chambers, initiates underwent the final stage of their rites. There, surrounded by darkness and stone that vibrated with the chants from above, they would face the echo of their own voice and understand that God spoke in reflection. The Temple of Echoes was not a single building, it was an idea, replicated wherever sacred proportion met human hand. It was the fusion of sound, light, and form, a living symbol of the world as instrument. When a bell rang within such a temple, the vibration was said to travel through the ley lines of the earth, awakening forgotten harmonics that pulsed beneath continents. Centuries later, when the Templars were condemned and their order scattered, many of these temples survived. Yet the knowledge that birthed them slipped again into shadow. The masons who followed would preserve fragments, the compass and square, the eye, the pillars, symbols divorced from their original language. But the echo remained. Even now, when you step into a cathedral built under the Templar pattern, the air still moves differently. If you stand in the center, just beneath the highest point of the vault, and whisper, the sound seems to return not from the walls but from within your chest, as if the building is breathing with you. That is the echo. The same pulse the architects once felt beneath Babylon, the same geometry that sang through Atlantis, the same voice that called the Templars to build. It was never about conquest, nor faith, nor treasure. It was about remembrance. The stone remembers what the world forgets, and somewhere deep beneath the foundations of those ancient cathedrals, sealed behind walls few have seen, the geometry continues to hum a frequency that waits, patient, for another order of seekers to listen again. Beneath the holy stones of Jerusalem, where faith and empire met in uneasy silence, the Templars dug. They claimed to guard the Temple Mount, yet what they sought lay not above but below, hidden corridors, sealed vaults, and something older than the scriptures carved into the rock itself. The chronicles speak vaguely of relics, but among the order's private records, one phrase repeats: the blood and the blueprint. For the Templars believed that spirit could not move matter without a bridge, and that bridge was the human vessel. In the chambers below the Temple Mount, the Knights became scholars, alchemists, engineers of the invisible. They mapped the crypt not by torchlight, but by vibration, tapping the walls, listening for the harmonic frequency of each chamber. It was said that beneath the third vault, they found a pattern engraved into black basalt, 12 circles bound by one line, the same symbol once drawn by the architects of shadow. And beside it, an inscription in an unknown script, half worn by time, which they translated only as "to awaken stone, mix the song with the blood." The Templars were not strangers to sacrifice. But what they sought here was not death, it was ignition. They believed that human blood carried the microcosmic pattern of creation, the same ratios found in stars and in sacred geometry. If the right vibration were applied, it could become a conductor of divine resonance. In essence, they sought to turn man himself into the living temple, a vessel capable of bridging heaven and earth. At first, their experiments were symbolic droplets of blood mixed with sacred oil, sprinkled upon stone altars tuned to specific tones. But symbolism gave way to obsession. The records hint at rituals performed beneath the city, where chanting met the steady rhythm of drums designed to mimic the earth's pulse. Within that sound, they poured their lifeblood onto etched sigils of copper and gold, hoping to reactivate what Babylon had once touched. What they found or believed they found changed them. Witnesses wrote that the stones began to hum, faintly at first, then with growing intensity as if echoing from within the earth. The vibration traveled upward, through the tunnels into the cathedral foundations above. The Templars reported visions, flashes of geometry made of light, forms folding in on themselves, a feeling of being both inside and outside their own bodies. One described it as seeing God from within his own design. Another never spoke again. The Grand Master at the time, Hughes de Payens, ordered the experiment sealed. Yet fragments of the ritual spread through the order like whispers of forbidden fire. Some knights carried the knowledge westward, embedding it into the proportions of their new cathedrals. Others went further, merging alchemy with bloodlines, seeking families whose lineage carried the same resonance, a biological echo of the divine pattern. That was the birth of the myth of the holy bloodline. Not a royal descent, but a harmonic one, those whose very DNA resonated with the frequency of the temple. The blueprint was not only carved in stone, it was written in flesh. When the church learned of their work, it called them heretics. Perhaps rightly so, for what the Templars attempted was not worship, but recreation. They sought to reassemble the architecture of the cosmos within themselves to become the instrument through which the divine could sing again. And yet, as history turned against them, as fires consumed their libraries and their leaders met the pyre, a few carried the secret westward, once more encoded in symbols, bloodlines, and silent geometries that still ripple through history. The blueprints became the Gothic cathedrals. The blood became legend. But in truth, they were one and the same, the living and the built, echoing the same design. It is said that on the night before Jacques de Molay was executed, he whispered a single sentence to his guards: "Stone remembers blood, and blood remembers light." No one knows what he meant, but those who've studied the cathedrals that rose after his death claim that under moonlight certain carvings seem to shimmer as if the pattern still breathes, as if the sacrifice was never in vain, because geometry does not die. It migrates, it waits, it hides in symmetry and sound, in the rhythm of our own pulse. And somewhere beneath the ruins of Jerusalem, the stones still hum faintly, tuned to a frequency only blood can answer, long after the fires that consumed the Templars, long after the stones of Jerusalem had cooled and the echo of blood had faded. A subtler blueprint persisted, one etched not in stone, but in flesh. The Renaissance men, the alchemists, the anatomists, they called it the microcosm, a reflection of the cosmos mapped within the human body. Leonardo da Vinci, in his quiet Florentine studies, traced the proportions of man with divine precision. capturing the same harmonic ratios the Templars had sought in blood and stone. Each bone, each muscle, each vein, he noted, was a line in a celestial diagram, a living diagram that whispered the same secrets the Knights once pursued beneath the Temple Mount. It was in these centuries that the map beneath the skin became more than theory. Secret societies studied cadavers in dimly lit chambers, aligning the sinews of flesh with the geometry of cathedrals, testing vibration and resonance, and recording patterns in codices that would later vanish or be burned as heresy. The human body was no longer simply a vessel. It was an instrument, a blueprint of creation, a bridge between the material and the divine. The teachings of Babylon, Egypt, and Greece, once encoded in stone and blood, now flowed through ink, paint, and parchment. Renaissance architects incorporated the proportions into domes and arches, unaware that they were channeling a resonance first discovered in hidden Templar vaults. Painters sculpted the human form with careful measurement, capturing the same harmonic ratios, the same sacred geometry that could make matter itself vibrate in harmony with the cosmos. And yet the knowledge remained fragmented, obscured. Only those who understood the lineage of resonance could read the map beneath the skin. Bloodlines mattered, ancestry mattered, the hum of life within the veins, the pulse of the heart, the alignment of limbs. These were all keys, each individual a cipher, each body a cathedral. By the late 17th century, whispers of the map had crossed oceans. Freemasons and Rosicrucians, inheriting fragments of Templar lore, studied the human form, the architecture of the cosmos, and the patterns of stars. The blueprint became more abstract, more encoded, yet it remained present in art, in ritual, in secret chambers built beneath grand cathedrals in Paris, London, and Florence. And in the quietest moments, when candlelight flickered across a skull or a Vitruvian sketch, the secret would stir faintly, insistently reminding humanity that the universe was not outside, but within. That geometry, rhythm, and resonance were not merely observed, they were lived. And that to truly understand the world, one had to map the cosmos beneath the skin of man himself. The legacy of the Templars had survived. Not in swords or gold, not in burned parchments or vanished cities, but in the pulse of life, in the proportions of the human body, in the silent hum that links blood to stone, flesh to sky, and man to the divine design. Centuries had passed and the Templar flame had dimmed, yet the whispers of their knowledge never truly vanished. The map beneath the skin, the resonance of blood and stone, had been inherited, carefully curated, and guarded by those who understood that revelation is dangerous and truth must be shrouded. These were the guardians of silent, secret societies whose purpose was not conquest but preservation. In the shadowed halls of Europe, in libraries sealed for generations, in chambers beneath cathedrals whose names were forgotten, these guardians carried forward the codes of the ancient world. Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Hermetic orders, each society held fragments of the same design, each ritual a lock, each symbol a key. They spoke in gestures, in numbers, in patterns woven into stone and parchment, ensuring the knowledge could survive without being misused. The map beneath the skin, once the domain of anatomists and alchemists, now became a tool of initiation. A carefully guided eye could read the rhythm of a heartbeat as though it were the cadence of a cosmic drum. A touch on a palm could reveal hidden geometries, the alignment of energy lines that mirrored the heavens. Those who were trained could discern patterns invisible to the uninitiated, the pulse of history, the resonance of thought, the echo of ancient civilizations buried beneath layers of time. And yet silence was sacred. To speak freely of these truths invited chaos. The Guardians moved in networks across cities, across countries, their members anonymous to the world but intimately linked to each other through symbols and subtle signals. Architecture became their language. Cathedrals, bridges, and monuments held the echoes of sacred geometry, instructions for the attentive seeker, blueprints that resonated with hidden frequencies, vibrations that could awaken understanding or destroy the unprepared mind. By the 19th century, the Guardians of Silence had extended their reach into the modern world. Scientific societies, clandestine academies, and even political circles carried coded knowledge in plain sight. It was embedded in ceremonial halls, in engravings on doors, in the proportions of statues, even in the music composed for royal courts. Everything bore a hint, a resonance, a trace of the ancient blueprint. And now, in the age of information, when knowledge spreads faster than ever, yet meaning is drowned in noise, the Guardians remain. They move quietly among the scholars, the architects, the historians, and even the engineers of technology, ensuring that the map beneath the skin, the living connection between human cosmos and the echo of pre-Templar civilizations, is never forgotten, never desecrated. They remind us that some truths are not meant for the casual gaze, that silence can be a shield as much as a weapon, and that understanding often requires patience, subtlety, and reverence. The Guardians of Silence hold the keys to a world where geometry, blood, ritual, and history converge, waiting for the next seeker brave enough to perceive the hidden pattern. Even as centuries rolled into decades, the patterns of the past refused to be silenced. The Guardians of Silence had safeguarded knowledge, but the world around them was awakening to the echoes they had preserved. The eternal resonance of vibration threaded through time, matter, and consciousness could be felt by those attuned, a hum beneath the surface of reality that whispered of the truths buried by pre-Templar civilizations. In music, one could hear it. Composers, whether consciously or unconsciously, arranged notes in ratios that mirrored sacred geometry, creating harmonies that resonated not just in the ear but in the body, the rhythm of a heartbeat, the pulse of the cosmos, and the cadence of a cathedral's stone arches all sang the same song. A frequency that connected human life with the order of the universe. Those who listened closely could feel a recognition, a subtle awakening, as if remembering a pattern forgotten in birth. Architecture, too, became a living testimony. Monuments, cathedrals, and bridges were not merely functional structures, but instruments tuned to the eternal resonance. Stone, proportion, and line were carefully calibrated to catch the hidden vibrations of light and sound, shaping not only spaces but perception itself. Walk beneath a vaulted ceiling, and the past would murmur in the hollow of your chest. Trace a carved spiral, and the mathematics of Babylon, Egypt, and Atlantis would pulse under your fingers. Even science, the modern pursuit of reason, bore traces of this resonance. Patterns once hidden in ritual and alchemy surfaced in physics, astronomy, and biology. Fibonacci sequences, the golden ratio, fractals of nature, and the hidden geometry of crystals were all echoes of a wisdom older than memory. The Guardians, now more subtle than ever, ensured that these insights remained accessible to those who could approach them with reverence, while shielding them from those who would exploit their power. Consciousness itself seemed to vibrate in alignment with these ancient codes. Meditation, focused intent, and ritual, whether ceremonial or silent, could awaken the connection between body, mind, and cosmos. The eternal resonance was a bridge from blood to stone, from ancient rites to modern discovery, from silence to revelation. It demanded patience, observation, and humility. Those who embraced it glimpsed a world where time folded, where history, geometry, and human experience interwove, and where the whispers of civilizations long gone could still guide the living. Yet this resonance was not passive. It demanded discernment. Misaligned or ignored, the energy could fragment perception, distort understanding, or invite chaos. Only those who had been trained, initiated, and guided, the true heirs of the Guardians of Silence, could navigate its power safely. And still the song played on, waiting for seekers attuned to its subtle frequencies, ready to reveal the hidden blueprint of existence itself. The eternal resonance was more than knowledge. It was an experience, a pulse connecting past and future, visible and invisible, the mortal and the divine. It reminded the world that wisdom never truly dies, that patterns persist across ages, and that the Templars, their predecessors, and the silent Guardians had left a legacy vibrating still. Beneath the skin of history, beneath the stone, beneath the very fabric of reality, the world had changed, yet the hidden currents beneath it had only grown stronger. Where the eternal resonance once whispered through stone and ritual, it now found new conduits in technology, maps of human consciousness, and the intricate networks of modern cities. The hidden convergence was upon us, a rare alignment where ancient wisdom intersected with contemporary knowledge, where symbols etched in temples centuries ago echoed in circuits, code, and data streams. It began in subtle ways. Researchers discovered mathematical patterns in genomes that mirrored sacred geometry. Architects found ancient proportions resurfacing in urban layouts. Even digital networks pulsed with rhythms echoing those of forgotten temples. The Guardians, long silent, had anticipated this. They had always known that knowledge, like water, finds its way flowing from the past into the present, seeking those prepared to receive it. At the heart of this convergence were artifacts, fragments of scrolls, statues, and inscriptions long hidden, now rediscovered. Each carried layers of encoded insight. Babylonian tablets describing celestial mechanics, Egyptian carvings hinting at energy flow, Atlantean glyphs depicting structures of consciousness. These relics, when aligned with modern understanding, revealed a startling truth: the ancients had mapped the mind, the cosmos, and the delicate bridge between the two, in ways that contemporary science was only beginning to recognize. Yet convergence was not merely intellectual, it was experiential. Practitioners reported moments where time felt to expand and contract, where intuition pierced layers of perceived reality, and where the resonance of centuries past harmonized with immediate perception. Cities became labyrinths of hidden frequencies. The ordinary world, when approached with intent, transformed into a map layered with meaning. But danger shadowed this revelation. Forces that sought control, domination, or exploitation of these truths emerged simultaneously. Knowledge had always carried duality: enlightenment for the disciplined, chaos for the reckless. The guardians of silence, though mostly unseen, now faced a crucial task: guiding seekers through the convergence without allowing the resonance to fracture under greed or ignorance. In this convergence, the past and present were inseparable. The Templars, their forebears in the mystic schools, had set the stage for this alignment. Every symbol, every ritual, every carefully hidden code was a waypoint, a signal to those attuned. Those who approached with humility, focus, and courage could trace the threads from ancient ziggurats to digital landscapes, from ritual chambers to neural networks, discovering patterns that defied conventional explanation yet felt undeniably true. The hidden convergence revealed that history was not a straight line, but a lattice of knowledge lessons repeated, forgotten, and rediscovered, a network vibrating with meaning across time. And as the resonance of the ancients intertwined with modern insight, the human mind itself became a vessel, capable of perceiving and participating in a wisdom that transcended individual lifetimes. It was a revelation, a warning, and an invitation. The convergence was not passive. It demanded engagement. To walk this path was to enter a dialogue with the past, to navigate the frequencies of reality itself, and to accept the responsibility of knowledge that could alter perception, society, and perhaps even the very nature of existence. For centuries, the veiled order had moved in shadows, their influence subtle yet pervasive, threading through the corridors of power, the halls of learning, and the sacred spaces of forgotten temples. Their legacy was not written in open history books, but encoded in symbols, architecture, and ritual, a silent testimony to knowledge too potent for casual understanding. Now, as the hidden convergence reached its zenith, their true purpose became impossible to ignore. The legacy was not merely a collection of secrets, but a living network of wisdom. From the pre-Templar civilizations through the Babylonian veils, the architects of shadow, and the echoes of ancient temples, every generation had left markers like breadcrumbs across time. The guardians of silence, the Templars, and the mystic schools of Egypt and Atlantis had preserved, refined, and concealed these markers, ensuring that only those prepared could follow the path. In the convergence of past and present, the Order's greatest secret emerged: knowledge is not possession, but resonance. Those who truly understood it could perceive patterns in the cosmos and the human mind alike, navigate hidden currents of history, and align themselves with forces that defied conventional reality. To wield this knowledge demanded humility, discipline, and courage, virtues tested in temples, in labyrinthine archives, and in the silent spaces between worlds. The artifacts, symbols, and codices scattered across civilizations were not merely tools, but keys. The Temple of Echoes, the maps beneath the skin, the resonances that transcended time, all converged here. Each seeker who approached with intent could feel the pulse of the Order. a rhythm that had guided humanity's hidden architects for millennia. It was a dialogue, a mentorship beyond the grave, orchestrated by those who understood the fragility and power of knowledge. Yet the legacy carried warnings. Misuse could fracture the mind, distort perception, and unleash forces beyond comprehension. The convergence illuminated the duality of enlightenment and chaos, the eternal balance the veiled order had sworn to protect. Those who sought shortcuts, who pursued knowledge for greed or domination, encountered invisible barriers, subtle but insurmountable, leaving only confusion and despair. As the final pieces fell into place, it became clear the Order's purpose was not control, but stewardship. They had built a lattice of understanding, a framework through which human potential could expand safely, guided by wisdom accumulated over millennia. In this light, the Templars' crusades, the architects' shadows, and the silent guardians' interventions all became intelligible parts of a continuum, a legacy designed to shepherd seekers toward resonance with the eternal, and for those attuned, the world transformed. Ordinary spaces revealed hidden geometries. Cities sang frequencies of forgotten rituals. The mind became a vessel, a bridge connecting the temporal with the timeless. The legacy was alive, not static. It flowed through those ready to perceive it, shaping understanding and perception, awakening insights that could alter not just knowledge, but reality itself. The Veiled Order's message was clear: history is alive. Knowledge is sacred and wisdom is a responsibility. To inherit this legacy is to accept the duty of perception, the courage to navigate unseen currents, and the awareness that one's choices ripple through time, shaping the resonance of the eternal. In the end, the legacy was not lost nor hidden in the shadows. It was waiting for the attentive, the humble, and the brave, a living inheritance, a guide, and a challenge to honor the past, engage the present, and awaken to the possibilities of a future harmonized with the hidden truths of the universe. Thus concludes the journey through the pre-Templar civilizations, the guardians of hidden wisdom, and the eternal resonance of the Veiled Order. But the resonance continues in the symbols around us, the patterns within us, and the convergence awaiting those ready to perceive it.